The Korath Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire was so large that it covered 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way. No species had ever beaten them in war. No civilization had ever refused their commands and lived to tell the story. They were the masters of everything, and they wanted everyone to remember this fact. But their greatest weapon was not their massive fleet of warships. It was not their millions of soldiers. It was a place. A region of space that stretched for thousands of light years, where the stars themselves seemed to die. The Korath called it the Silence. Scientists from 100 different species had tried to study it and failed. Ships that went in never came out. Entire fleets had vanished into the darkness without sending a single message back. Humans called it the Dead Zone. For thousands of years, the Korath had used the Dead Zone as a tool of fear. When a species refused to obey, when a civilization dared to stand against them, the Korath would drive them toward the Dead Zone. They would watch as ship after ship crossed the boundary and disappeared forever. It was clean. It was simple. It was terrifying. When humanity first made contact with the galactic community, they were amazed. They thought they had found friends among the stars. They were wrong. The Korath ambassador came to Earth with a simple message. Surrender your resources. Accept our rule. Or face the silence. The humans refused. Commander Lisa Vance was 43 years old. She had served in the United Earth Navy for 20 years. She had black hair that was starting to show streaks of gray, and eyes that had seen too much death. Her husband, Daniel, had been a captain. He commanded the carrier Endurance, the largest ship in the human fleet. Her daughter, Amy, had been 22 years old. She served as a lieutenant on the frigate Dauntless. 3 weeks ago, Lisa had been far away from Earth, commanding the destroyer USS Resolute on a deep space survey mission. They were mapping a new star system, looking for planets that might support human colonies. It was boring work, but Lisa did not mind. She liked the quiet. Then the message came. The Korath had attacked. The human fleet had tried to defend Earth, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Korath did not want to fight a long war. They wanted to send a message. So they drove the entire human fleet toward the Dead Zone. 47 ships. 18,000 men and women. Mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. Daniel was among them. Amy was among them. Lisa watched the recording 100 times. She saw the Endurance trying to protect the smaller ships. She saw the Dauntless take a hit to its engines. She saw the fleet cross the boundary into the Dead Zone, one ship after another, until the sensors showed nothing but empty space. They were gone. All of them. When the Resolute returned to Earth, they found the planet in chains. Korath ships filled the sky. Human cities had been bombed into submission. The people who survived were being processed for labor camps. The Korath were not interested in negotiation. They were interested in punishment. The Resolute was the last human warship left. Lisa stood on the bridge and looked at her crew. There were 52 of them. Young men and women who had joined the Navy because they believed in something. They believed in Earth. They believed in humanity. They believed that the stars could be a place of hope instead of fear. Now they were all that was left. Lieutenant Kevin Walsh sat at the sensor station. He was 28 years old, with red hair and freckles that made him look even younger. His hands were shaking as he worked the controls. Lisa could not blame him. They were all scared. "Commander," Kevin said, his voice barely loud enough to hear, "I am picking up something strange." Lisa walked over to his station. "What is it?" "Distress beacons. Hundreds of them." Kevin looked up at her with wide eyes. "They are coming from inside the Dead Zone." The bridge went silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing. They all knew what this meant. Someone was still alive in there. Someone was calling for help. Lisa felt something stir in her chest. It was not hope. It was something harder than hope. It was duty. Navigation, she said. Plot a course for the dead zone. A young woman named Sandra Perry looked up from the navigation console. She was barely 25, with brown skin and nervous eyes. Commander, no ship has ever returned from the dead zone. The Korath have been using it as a weapon for thousands of years. If we go in there, we will die. Lisa nodded slowly. You are right. That is what everyone believes. The Korath believe it. Every species in the galaxy believes it. She paused and looked around the bridge. But those are our people in there. Our friends. Our family. She thought about Daniel. She thought about Amy. She thought about 18,000 souls who had been thrown away like garbage. The Korath think we are finished, Lisa continued. They think they have broken us. They think humanity will crawl on its knees and beg for mercy. Her voice grew harder. I say we show them what humans are really made of. Patricia Cole, the chief engineer, stood up from her station at the back of the bridge. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been in the Navy longer than anyone else on the ship. I have been looking at some old research files, Cole said. Theoretical work on dimensional physics. The scientists who wrote these papers believed that the dead zone was not a natural phenomenon. They thought it was created by someone, something, and they believed that the right kind of shield, modifications might allow a ship to survive the transition. Have these modifications ever been tested? Lisa asked. No, Cole admitted. But the math looks solid. I think I can make it work. Lisa looked at her crew one more time. She saw fear in their eyes. But she also saw something else. She saw determination. She saw courage. She saw the same fire that had made humanity reach for the stars in the first place. Get to work, she told Cole. We leave in 3 days. The crew did not argue. They did not complain. They simply got to work. Because they were human. And humans did not abandon their own. 3 days later, the USS Resolute pointed its nose toward the darkness and began to move. Behind them, Earth was a prisoner. In front of them, the dead zone waited like an open mouth. Lisa watched the boundary approach on the view screen. She thought about everything they were leaving behind. Everything they might never see again. Then she thought about vengeance. Take us in, she said. The Resolute crossed into the dead zone, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The first thing Lisa noticed was the silence. Real silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you feel like you were the last person alive in the universe. The normal hum of the ship seemed muted. The lights seemed dimmer. Everything felt wrong. Chief Engineer Patricia Cole had spent 3 days without sleep, modifying the shields. She had rewired systems that were never meant to be touched. She had burned out 2 power converters and nearly electrocuted herself twice. But the modifications held. The Resolute was still flying. For the first 6 hours, nothing happened. The ship moved deeper into the dead zone, and the crew held their breath. They watched their sensors and saw nothing but empty space. No stars, no planets. Just endless darkness in every direction. Then the whispers began. Ensign Derek Simmons was the first to hear them. He was sitting at the communication station, monitoring all frequencies or any sign of the distress beacons they had detected earlier. At first, he thought it was static, random noise from the ship's systems. But the more he listened, the more he realized there was a pattern to it. Voices, hidden in the static. Speaking words he could almost understand. Derek was a young man, only 24 years old. He had joined the Navy because his father had been a sailor and his grandfather before him. He was not the kind of person who believed in ghosts or spirits. But sitting there in the darkness, listening to those whispers, he felt something cold crawl up his spine. Commander, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I think you need to hear this. Lisa walked over to his station and put on a pair of headphones. She listened for a long moment. Her face did not change, but Derek saw her hands tighten into fists. "Patch it through to engineering," she ordered. "Tell Cole to analyze it." 20 minutes later, Cole called the bridge. Her voice was strange, excited and frightened at the same time. "It is not random," she reported. "There is a mathematical structure to it. Fibonacci sequences. Prime numbers. Patterns that repeat in ways that cannot be accidental." She paused. "Commander, something is trying to communicate with us." Lisa felt a chill run through her body. The dead zone was not empty. It had never been empty. Something lived here. Something old and powerful and completely unknown. "Can you translate it?" Lisa asked. "I am trying," Cole replied. "But the mathematics are complex. It might take hours. Maybe days." They did not have days. Every hour they spent in the dead zone was an hour that the survivors might not have. Lisa made a decision. "Keep working on it," she told Cole. "But do not stop moving. We have people to find." The Resolute continued deeper into the darkness. And as they flew, the whispers grew louder. They stopped being random patterns and started forming words. Broken at first. Fragments of sentences that made no sense. But slowly, piece by piece, a message began to emerge. The entity called itself the Warden. It spoke to them through every speaker on the ship. Its voice was strange. It sounded mechanical and organic at the same time. Old and young, male and female. It was as if 1,000 different voices were speaking in perfect harmony. "You are different," the Warden said. "The others who came before you were driven by fear. They entered this place because they had no choice. They were running from death. But you came here by choice. You came here looking for something." Lisa stood in the center of the bridge and spoke to the air. "We came here looking for our people. The Korath drove our fleet into this place 3 weeks ago. We detected distress beacons." "Yes," the Warden replied. "I know of them. I have been watching them, waiting to see if anyone would come. Are they alive?" There was a long pause. When the Warden spoke again, its voice was softer, almost gentle. "Some of them. A few hundred out of many thousands. Their ships died, but they reached escape pods. They have been drifting in the darkness, running out of air and hope. I could have helped them, but that is not my purpose." Lisa felt anger rise in her chest. "Then what is your purpose? To watch people die?" "No," the Warden said. "My purpose is to judge." The view screen flickered. Images began to appear. Lisa saw ships she did not recognize. Vessels from species that had been extinct for millions of years. She saw empires rise and fall. She saw civilizations reach for the stars and then crumble into dust. And through all of it, she saw the Warden watching, waiting, judging. "I was created by a civilization so old that even their name has been forgotten," the Warden explained. "They understood something that most species never learn. Power is not neutral. It changes those who hold it. And when power is used for cruelty, when empires are built on suffering, the universe itself demands a reckoning." "The dead zone," Lisa whispered. "You created it." "I am it," the Warden replied. "This region of space is not a natural phenomenon. It is a prison, a courtroom, a place where those who have committed crimes against existence are brought to face judgment." Lisa's mind was racing. 12,000 years. The Korath had been using the dead zone as a weapon for 12,000 years. They had driven countless species to their deaths here. And all along, they thought they were using a force of nature. They had no idea they were being watched. "The Korath," Lisa said slowly. "You have been watching them." For 12 millennia, the warden confirmed. "I have seen every atrocity, every murder, every act of cruelty. I have recorded it all, waiting for the moment when someone would come who was worthy of carrying my judgment. Why did you not stop them yourself?" The warden was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something like sadness in its voice. "Because that is not how justice works. Justice cannot be imposed from outside. It must come from within. It must be carried by those who have suffered, those who have lost, those who have every reason to seek revenge but choose something greater instead." Lisa understood. The warden was not just a judge. It was a weapon, but it was a weapon that could only be wielded by someone who had been wronged, someone like her. "You want us to carry your judgment to the Korath," she said. "I want to give you the choice," the warden replied. "You can take your survivors and flee, hide in some corner of the galaxy, and hope the Korath forget about you. Or you can accept the burden I offer. You can become the instrument of 12,000 years of delayed justice." Lisa looked around the bridge. She saw Kevin Walsh with his red hair and frightened eyes. She saw Sandra Perry gripping her console so hard her knuckles were white. She saw Derek Simmons staring at the view screen with his mouth hanging open. They were all looking at her, waiting for her to decide. Lisa thought about Daniel. She thought about Amy. She thought about 18,000 people who had been murdered for daring to say no. "Show me where our people are," she said. "Then show me what you can offer." The darkness around the Resolute began to shift. Lights appeared in the distance. Not stars, but something else. Something artificial. The wreckage of 1,000 civilizations gathered together in one impossible place. And at the center of it all, the warden waited. The wreckage stretched for thousands of kilometers. Lisa had never seen anything like it. Ships of every shape and size floated in the darkness. Some were small, barely larger than the Resolute. Others were massive, the size of small moons. They came from species that had died before Earth's sun was born. Their hulls were covered in symbols that no living being could read. And among them, clustered together like lost children, were the remains of the human fleet. Lisa stood at the view screen and felt her heart break. The Endurance was there, Daniel's ship, its hull torn open like a gutted fish. The Dauntless floated nearby, dark and silent. 47 ships, 47 coffins drifting in the void. But the warden had spoken true. There were survivors. The distress beacons came from hundreds of escape pods scattered among the wreckage. Small metal containers, each one holding 1 or 2 people who had managed to reach safety before their ships died. They had been floating in the darkness for 3 weeks, watching their air supply slowly run out, waiting for a rescue that they never thought would come. Lisa turned to Lieutenant Kevin Walsh. "Start bringing them in. All of them. I do not care how long it takes." "Yes, Commander," Kevin replied. His voice was stronger now. He had something to do. A purpose. The rescue operation took 2 days. The Resolute shuttle bay was not large enough to hold all the survivors, so they converted cargo holds and corridors into temporary shelters. Medical Officer Rachel Kim worked without rest, treating injuries and malnutrition and the psychological damage of spending 3 weeks alone in the dark. 316 people. That was how many they saved. 316 out of 18,000. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Among the survivors was Lieutenant Commander Gregory Dunn. He had been the executive officer of the Endurance, Daniel's second in command. He was a tall man in his late 30s, with dark skin and a shaved head. Before the attack, he had been muscular and confident. Now he was thin as a skeleton, his eyes hollow and haunted. Lisa found him in the medical bay, sitting on a bed and staring at the wall. She sat down next to him and waited. After a long time, he began to speak. "They knew," Gregory said. His voice was rough, like sandpaper. "The Korath knew exactly what they were doing. They have known about the dead zone for centuries. Longer than that, maybe. They know it does not just destroy ships randomly. They know it judges." "How do you know this?" Lisa asked. "Before the Endurance lost power, we intercepted some of their communications. They were laughing, Commander. They said that the dead zone would find us guilty of rebellion. They said that the silence would swallow us like it swallowed everyone else." Gregory finally looked at her, but it did not. "We are still here. The ships died, but we did not. The warden looked into us and found us acceptable." Lisa nodded slowly. "The warden told me the same thing. It judges those who enter this place. The Korath have been sending people here for 12,000 years, thinking they were feeding them to a monster. They never realized the monster was keeping score." Gregory was quiet for a moment. "Your husband did not make it. Neither did your daughter. I am sorry. Daniel was a good man. He fought until the end." Lisa felt tears burn in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Not yet. There would be time for grief later. Right now, she had work to do. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Rest now. Get your strength back. I am going to need you." Over the next 3 days, Chief Engineer Patricia Cole worked with the warden. The ancient entity showed her things that no human had ever seen. Technologies from civilizations that had mastered physics in ways that modern science could not even imagine. Weapons that could unmake stars. Shields that could turn aside any attack. Power sources that drew energy from dimensions that human mathematics could not describe. But the warden did not give them everything. It gave them only what they needed. A gift, it called it. A tool for carrying judgment. Cole worked day and night, her fingers bleeding from rewiring systems, her eyes red from lack of sleep. She modified the Resolute's hull, covering it with patterns that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them directly. She upgraded the shields until they were not really shields anymore, but something else entirely. Something that existed partially in this dimension and partially somewhere else. When she was finished, the Resolute was not the same ship anymore. It looked the same from the outside, more or less. But inside, everything had changed. The ship hummed with a power that made Lisa's teeth ache. "This is a gift and a burden," the warden warned them. Its voice echoed through the ship's speakers, gentle but firm. "When you leave this place, you will carry a piece of me with you. The Korath will feel it. They will know that their crimes have finally caught up with them. But the power I give you is not permanent. It will fade over time. You must choose carefully how to use it." Lisa gathered everyone in the main cargo hold. The original crew of 52, plus the 316 survivors. They stood together in the dim light, looking at her with eyes that held fear and hope and something else. Something fierce. "I am not going to lie to you," Lisa said. "We have a chance now. A real chance. The warden has given us the power to fight back against the Korath, to make them pay for what they did to our people, to our planet, to our families." She paused, looking at the faces before her. She saw Sandra Perry, who had lost her brother on the cruiser Washington. She saw Kevin Walsh, whose parents were still on Earth, probably in a labor camp. She saw Gregory Dunn, who had watched his entire crew die around him. "But I will not force anyone to fight," Lisa continued. "We can use this power to hide, to run, to find some quiet corner of the galaxy and hope the Korath never find us. That is a choice, a real choice, and I will not judge anyone who makes it." She took a deep breath. "Or we can go back. We can face the Korath with everything we have. We can show them that humanity is not broken. We can make them understand that there is a price for cruelty, that the universe does not forget." The cargo hold was silent. Then Gregory Dunn stepped forward. "I watched 18,000 people die," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. "I floated in the dark for 3 weeks, waiting to join them. I have nothing left to lose. If there is even a chance that we can make the Korath pay for what they did, I am taking it." One by one, others stepped forward. Sandra, Kevin, Derek, Rachel, every single person in the room. Moving to stand beside their commander, Lisa felt tears in her eyes again. This time, she let them fall. "All right," she said. "Then let us go home. And let us show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." The Resolute turned away from the graveyard of ships and pointed its nose toward the boundary of the dead zone. Toward Earth. Toward the Korath. Toward vengeance. Admiral Corvin was bored. He stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and looked down at the blue and green planet rotating beneath him. Earth. The humans called it Earth. Such a simple name for such a simple species. The Korath High Armada consisted of 200 warships. Each one was larger than a human city. Each one carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. They had gathered above Earth to oversee what the Dominion called integration, a polite word for slavery. The humans who survived the initial bombardment would be processed, sorted, assigned to labor camps across the Empire. Their children would be taken and raised to serve the Dominion. Within 3 generations, human culture would be erased. Human language would be forgotten. Human history would become nothing but a footnote. Corvin had seen it happen 1,000 times before. The Korath were very good at destroying civilizations. "Admiral," said his sensor officer, a young Korath named Velkar, "I am detecting an anomaly." Corvin turned to look at the sensor display. He saw nothing unusual, just empty space and the usual traffic of supply ships. "What kind of anomaly?" he asked. "I am not certain," Velkar replied. "There is a distortion in subspace. Something is approaching, but I cannot identify it. The readings make no sense." Corvin felt a small flicker of interest. That was unusual. Korath sensors were the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing should be able to hide from them. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The view screen shifted to show a section of empty space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the darkness began to tear. A ship emerged from subspace, trailing shadows behind it like smoke. It was small compared to the Korath vessels. Tiny, really. But something about it made Corvin's scales prickle with unease. The ship's hull was covered in patterns that hurt to look at. Geometries that seemed to shift and move, that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. And it was broadcasting on every frequency, every channel, every language that the Korath had ever encountered. "This is Commander Lisa Vance of the USS Resolute." A human voice. A female human voice. Calm and steady, as if she were reading a weather report. 23 days ago, you murdered 18,000 of my people. You drove them into the dead zone, believing they would be erased from existence. Corvin felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Something that no Korath admiral should ever feel. Fear. "You were wrong." The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers were shouting, running to their stations, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Corvin ignored them all. He stared at the view screen, at the impossible ship that should not exist, and he understood. The dead zone. Someone had returned from the dead zone. "All ships," he commanded. "Open fire. Destroy that vessel immediately." 200 Korath warships turned their weapons toward the Resolute. Plasma cannons that could melt steel in seconds. Missile batteries that could level cities. Energy beings that operated on principles that human science could not even name. They unleashed everything they had. The space around the Resolute turned white with energy. The amount of firepower was staggering. It was enough to crack a planet's crust. It was enough to destroy a small moon. When the light faded, the human ship was untouched. Lisa Vance's voice continued, still calm, still steady. The dead zone does not destroy. It remembers. It judges. And it has found the Korath Dominion guilty of 12,000 years of atrocities. On the bridge of the Resolute, Patricia Cole stood at her modified engineering station. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. She had not slept in 2 days. But when Lisa gave the signal, she was ready. The patterns on the ship's hull began to glow. Not with light, exactly. With something else. Something older. Something that existed before light was invented. Cole activated the weapon that the Warden had given them. It was not a beam. It was not a missile. It was not any kind of weapon that the galaxy had ever seen. It was something much simpler and much more terrible. It was truth. The energy spread outward from the Resolute in a wave. It moved faster than light, which should have been impossible. It washed over the Korath fleet like water flowing over stones. And wherever it touched, things began to change. Systems that had been built on stolen technology suddenly stopped working. The Korath had conquered 1,000 species over 12 millennia. They had taken the best ideas from each one, claiming them as their own. Now those stolen gifts were being stripped away. Weapons went dark. Engines sputtered and died. Shields flickered and failed. You ruled through fear, Lisa said. Her voice echoed through every speaker on every Korath ship. You believed that made you strong. But fear is not strength. It is a confession of weakness. Every species you crushed, every civilization you erased, every life you ended for no reason except that you could. The universe remembers all of it. On the Eternal Dominion, Corvum watched his instruments go dark one by one. Power was failing throughout the ship. Life support was cutting out on the lower decks. His crew was screaming in confusion and terror. He had commanded the Korath fleet for 50 years. He had conquered 12 species. He had never lost a battle. Now he was helpless. What is happening? He demanded. What is this? The view screen flickered. For a moment, he saw something impossible. Images, memories, faces of the dead, stretching back through thousands of years. Mokai and Velians and 100 other species that the Korath had destroyed. They looked at him with eyes full of sorrow and accusation. Then the screen went black around the crippled Korath fleet. Other ships were arriving. Not human ships. Velian cruisers. Mokai battleships. Vessels from 12 different species that had been enslaved by the Dominion for centuries. They had been waiting, watching, hoping for a moment exactly like this. The rebellion had begun. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the chaos unfold. The Korath flagship was drifting, powerless. Its escorts were scattered, their crews panicking. The slaves were rising up. The Empire was crumbling. Gregory Dunn stood beside her. We did it, he said quietly. We actually did it. Lisa shook her head. This is just the beginning. The Korath have 1,000 worlds. Millions of ships. Billions of soldiers. One battle does not end an empire. No, Gregory agreed. But it is a start. Lisa looked at the view screen. At the burning ships. At the planet below, where millions of humans were still in chains. Take us down, she ordered. We have people to free. The Resolute descended toward Earth. Behind it, the greatest fleet in galactic history was falling apart. And above it all, unseen but watching, the Warden observed. Humanity had made its choice. Now it remained to be seen what they would do with their victory. The fall of the Korath Dominion took 3 months. It began above Earth, with 200 warships drifting powerless in the void. But it did not end there. The Resolute carried the Warden's judgment from system to system, world to world. Wherever the ship appeared, the truth followed. Stolen technology failed. Systems built on lies and cruelty stopped working. The foundations of the Empire crumbled like sand, but the Resolute did not conquer. Lisa Vance made that clear from the very beginning. "We are not here to replace one empire with another," she told her crew after the battle for Earth. "We are here to set things right." There's a difference. Some people did not understand the difference. Some of the survivors from the Dead Zone wanted revenge. They wanted to burn Korath worlds the way the Korath had burned human cities. They wanted to make the enemy suffer. Lisa understood the feeling. She had lost her husband. She had lost her daughter. She had every reason to want the Korath to experience the same pain they had caused. But she remembered what the Warden had said. Justice cannot be imposed from outside. It must come from within. It must be carried by those who have suffered. Those who have every reason to seek revenge but choose something greater instead. So the Resolute traveled the galaxy. And wherever it went, it brought truth instead of destruction. The Warden's power showed everyone what the Korath had done. 12,000 years of crimes, laid bare for all to see. The conquered species did not need humanity to fight their battles. They only needed to know that they could fight it all. On the Velian homeworld, a population of 2 billion rose up against their Korath overseers in a single night. The fighting was brief and bloody, but in the end, the Velians were free for the first time in 8,000 years. On Morkai Prime, the ancient warrior clans came together for the first time in generations. They drove the Korath from their sacred mountains and burned the occupation headquarters to the ground. Everywhere, the same story repeated. Species that had been crushed for millennia found their courage again. They saw the cracks in the Empire, and they struck by the end of the 3rd month. The Korath Dominion had collapsed. Not destroyed, not erased, but transformed. The military government that had ruled for 12,000 years was gone, replaced by chaos and uncertainty. Korath civilians, most of whom had never done anything wrong, found themselves facing the anger of 100 species they have been taught to see as inferior. Lisa watched the news reports from the bridge of the Resolute. She saw Korath homes burning. She saw Korath children crying. She saw the same cruelty that had been done to humanity being done to the enemy. "We have to stop this," she said. Gregory Dunn looked at her with tired eyes. He had become her second in command over the past 3 months, her right hand in everything. He was still thin, still haunted, but he was stronger now. Purpose had given him something to hold on to. "Stop what?" he asked. "They're getting what they deserve, are they?" Lisa turned to face him. "Those are not soldiers burning down there. They are farmers, teachers, children, people who had nothing to do with the decisions their government made. Their government murdered our families." Gregory said quietly, "Yes, and does that give us the right to murder theirs?" The bridge was silent. Everyone was listening. Everyone was thinking. Lisa took a deep breath. "The Warden gave us power," she said. "More power than humanity has ever held. We could use it to make the Korath suffer. We could burn their worlds and enslave their people and call it justice. But that is not justice. That is just revenge with a prettier name." She looked around at her crew. At Kevin Walsh, who had grown from a frightened boy into a capable officer. At Sandra Perry, who had found purpose in the navigation console. At Patricia Cole, whose engineering genius had made all of this possible. "We are better than that," Lisa continued. "That is what makes us human. Not our technology, not our ships, our choice. The choice to be merciful when we have every reason not to be. The choice to build instead of destroy. The choice to remember our pain without passing it on to others. Gregory was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. "We help," Lisa said simply. "Everyone who needs it. Korath and Velian and Murkai and human. We stop the violence where we can. We protect the innocent. We show the galaxy that humanity stands for something more than revenge." The Resolute changed course. Instead of moving toward the next Korath stronghold, it moved toward a planet where riots were destroying civilian neighborhoods. They arrived in orbit and broadcast a message calling for peace. When that did not work, they landed medical teams and supplies. They stood between angry mobs and frightened families. It was not easy. It was not clean. Some people called them traitors for helping the enemy. Some people called them weak, but others saw what they were doing and understood. Other species sent ships to help. 8 convoys formed. Peace talks began. 3 weeks later, Lisa stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching Earth turn beneath her. The planet was healing. The Korath occupiers were gone. Human cities were being rebuilt. Children were playing in parks that had been battlefields just months ago. Patricia Cole found her there. The engineer looked even older than she had before, her gray hair wilder, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. But there was a peace in her face that had not been there before. "The Warden's power is fading," Cole reported. "We have maybe one more jump before the modifications fail completely. The ship will go back to being an ordinary destroyer." Lisa nodded. She had expected this. The gift was never meant to be permanent. "It was enough," she said. "More than enough. What do we do now?" Lisa smiled. It was a small smile, tinged with sadness, but real. "We do what we said we would do. We help. We build. We remember." She turned away from the window. "The Warden gave us a chance, not a crown. What happens next is up to us." The Resolute made one final journey. Back to the dead zone. Back to the place where everything had changed. The Warden was waiting for them, its voice filling the ship's speakers one last time. "You chose well, Commander," it said. "I have watched this galaxy for millions of years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have seen empires built on blood and crumbling into dust. But I have rarely seen what you have done. You had the power to become tyrants, and you chose to become healers instead. Was that the real test?" Lisa asked. "Not whether we could defeat the Korath, but what we would do after." "Yes," the Warden replied. "Power does not reveal character. It creates it. What you do when you have nothing to fear and nothing to lose defines what you truly are." The modifications began to fade. The patterns on the hull grew dim. The hum of ancient power faded into silence. "Will we see you again?" Lisa asked. "Perhaps," the Warden said. "When the next species faces its moment of choice. When the next empire needs to be judged. But for now, your galaxy is in your hands. I suggest you take good care of it." The connection broke. The Resolute was alone again. Just an ordinary ship with an ordinary crew in an ordinary universe. But nothing would ever be ordinary again. As the ship turned toward home, a message went out across every human frequency. Lisa recorded it herself, standing on the bridge with her crew around her. "This is Commander Lisa Vance of the USS Resolute. 3 months ago, we entered the dead zone looking for survivors. We found something more. We found justice. We found purpose. We found out what humanity can become when we stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other." She paused, thinking of Daniel, thinking of Amy, thinking of everyone who had been lost. "We are still here. We remember. And we will never stop fighting for each other. Not through violence. Not through revenge. But through something harder. Something better. We will fight with kindness. With mercy. With hope, the galaxy learned a lesson today. Humanity is small. Humanity is young. But humanity is not to be underestimated. Because when the dead zone destroyed fleets, one human ship returned. Lisa smiled, and her voice carried across the stars. And vengeance, in human hands, became something the universe had never seen before. It became justice. It became mercy. It became a promise. We are humanity. This is who we choose to be. The Resolute flew on through the darkness, carrying that promise toward the waiting stars. The war was over. The real work was just beginning.